Hello, hello, and welcome to the Rock Metal Podcast. I'm your host, John Harris, and today we have a special chat because we're gonna go down the guitar gear rabbit hole. I think we've got Miles Meakin on, who is in Midnight City, Life of a Hero, recently collaborated with Caned, and he is a DiMarzio artist, among other things. Today we're going to be going down that rabbit hole, chatting about DiMarzio, chatting about guitar tone, chatting about Miles's life as a guitar player, Midnight City, Life of a Hero, and the recent collaboration Power Up with Caned. So, Miles, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely great to have you on. Thanks for popping on in such short notice, because I just emailed you like 2 days ago with a crazy question that I'm sure every guitar player is waiting for, which is... I came across your DiMarzio page. You use pickups. What kind of pickups do you use? You probably were waiting for that phone call.
Well, I use quite a lot of them, to be fair. But the main ones for Midnight City, I use DiMarzio Tone Zone and the Air Norton, and then also sometimes I also use the Deactivator set.
Mm-hmm. Okay, why those for Midnight City?
Okay, so being really into guitar, growing up listening to like a lot of 80s hair metal and hard rock music, one of my favorite bands is Racer X, with Paul Gilbert and Bruce Bouillet, and back in obviously round about the Racer X, back in Racer X's day, and very early Mr. Big, Paul Gilbert used the DiMarzio Tone Zone. So I thought, you listen to all the videos, you watch all the videos of Mr. Big in like the very early days, and Paul Gilbert's tone just sounds so hair metal. It just sounds so kick-ass and cool. And then in the neck pickup, the reason for the Air Norton is because that's what John Petrucci used to use when he was endorsed with Ibanez. So yeah, he used to use the Air Norton, and I thought that combination would be really, really cool. And then years later, I found out one of my other favorite guitar players, Rob Marcello, uses the exact same pickups. Rob Marcello from Danger Danger. So, he has phenomenal tone, great guitar player, really, really cool guy. And it's just really, really cool that, we're both using the exact same pickups. And obviously, they work really, really well for Midnight City.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the first things I noticed with regard to Midnight City was... you guys are calling back, but it sounds modern.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things.
Well, that's fortunate because obviously with modern day technology, it's basically just doing. It's almost kind of like, think of it like say for example, I don't know. Let's say if like say if Warrant wants to completely remaster their like first ever album or something, with modern day technology, obviously you can make it sound modern because obviously you're using modern day technology, modern day guitar amps, modern day microphones, speakers, cabinets, drum kits, bass guitars, etc.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I chatted with Pete about that, and he was saying that he tailored the mixing to be a little more modern. But it almost sounds like maybe would you prefer to go do an older school approach for a Midnight City record?
Actually, no. I'm really happy with like how each of the albums have sounded. I think Pete as a mixing engineer and as a record producer, he does an absolutely phenomenal job at what he does. To say, obviously Midnight City, we are like a massive throwback to like 80s hard rock music, but because of Pete's knowledge on like mixing and engineering with PMP Productions. He did an absolutely fantastic job, and he's awesome.
All right. Now, the funny thing about the Tone Zone Air Norton combo is I got recommended that combo years ago as well. I noticed that they put it into a lot of their guitars, and I always thought of John Petrucci myself because I guess that's where I came into the picture. And then also as well, similarly, I remember listening to various Paul Gilbert records and thinking that sound, what is that sound? And then I found out that it was the Tone Zone. And then recently I was going down the rabbit hole. The word rabbit hole came up from my wife, and from a custom pickup manufacturer I started talking to, and they're like, "Okay, we're going to disconnect because you are going down the rabbit hole of pickups right now. They are important, but they are not that important." And I'm like, "Well, are they important or not important? I need to know now." Is the Tone Zone Air Norton came from the development of the EVH guitar, the original Music Man EVH guitar.
That is correct.
Yeah, and they put that set into it, gave it to Eddie, and he said, "I don't like it, but I kind of like it." So they modded it, and that's what he has. And then they thought, well, screw you, Eddie. This is the greatest set of pickups on the planet. And then just started selling it on the market, as is. So once you start thinking about that, you start listening to Eddie's days with the Music Man and the 5150, it starts to make a lot more sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Beautiful. Okay, and so we got everybody on the planet using it, which is great. Now, you mentioned, the other thing, actually, that you mentioned was the deactivator set sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Why sometimes? What is it that the deactivator brings to the table?
Okay, so the deactivator itself they're phenomenal sounding pickups, both for rhythm and lead stuff. So with the whole deactivator thing, it's like having active pickups, but without any of like the negative aspects of an active pickup. So for example, for example, the deactivator doesn't need batteries. That's one of the important things. It doesn't need, so there's no need to get the drill and do a whole routing on the back of the guitar, for a battery pack. It's ridiculous. But also they've got less compression than an actual active. They've got a little bit more dynamic. But they sound great for anything that's like metal, like heavy metal or thrash or whatever. They sound great for that. So I would mainly use them for doing additional rhythm guitar parts, basically on this third album.
Okay, because your tone on this third album from Midnight City is different. It sounds a little more snarly in places.
Yeah, I think I definitely agree with that. Okay. So with the deactivators, I tried to do on some of the songs. I used them for both the leads and the rhythms, and then other songs I would literally just for rhythms just the deactivators, and then for the main actual guitar solos, Tone Zone and Air Norton. But what's interesting is that because of the completely different spec guitars they're in, my Tone Zone and Air Norton's in a mahogany body neck through LTD MH model with a rosewood board. So kind of like Les Paul specifications there, while the deactivators are in a proper traditional Stratocaster. So older body, bolt-on neck, maple fretboard, 22 frets. So the deactivators being in that sound pretty damn bright, but it's not like a nasty wasp or bee in your ear kind of sound. Obviously not that kind of nasty high end. It's like a nice brightness to it that just really, it makes rhythm guitars sound really, really kick ass.
That's going to be my next rabbit hole. You mentioned a few things there about woods and construction. So neck through body, I've heard that the sustain increases, but the low end goes down. Is that true?
So I probably would say so the sustain definitely gives you more sustain, but I would probably say it probably adds more bass and low mids. It makes the guitar sound warmer. It's definitely got a way more warmer sound to it.
Okay. And you're using that with the Tone Zone, and the Air Norton, which are pretty warm pickups. So you probably have you give Pete a headache trying to chase down all those low mids to suck them out so that we can hear your guitar.
Not at all. No, not really. No, not at all. Which is interesting that you should say that. I'm not entirely. I mean, the reason I want to try I've always wanted a neck through guitar, like a prop, because in the past I've had set neck guitars, with Epiphone with their V's, and a couple of friends of mine had Les Pauls, and they were okay. They sounded okay, but neck through is where you get the dead easy access to the high frets. And obviously with the mahogany body, Because Pete would always say to me like, "Oh, Miles, you got to get yourself a Les Paul." And I am not a Les Paul guy. I've never really been a big fan of Les Pauls. I mean, like a Strat and V kind of guy, basically. But because this guitar, I saw it had like similar specs to a Les Paul, the mahogany body, a neck through construction and rosewood board. I thought I'll get that and then see how that sounds for rhythm guitar parts, and then recorded guitar parts, sent them to Pete. And he loved the tone of the guitar. He thought it sounded great.
Yeah. Yeah, that brings up all kinds of good stuff, because mahogany, I've always heard, is a really good wood for doing rhythm tracks. And
Agreed.
If we go back to, I don't know, like some classic formats, you've got Metallica, where James is doing all the rhythm tracks, or at least most of them, on a massive mahogany Explorer.
Yeah.
A lot of wood there. And then you've got Kurt coming in to do some leads, or at least most of them, with an alder guitar.
Exactly. So it kind of makes sense. You got to get like it almost like, how can I say this? Like you got to kind of use the guitar that's going to over exaggerate whatever part that you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If that makes sense.
It does. Yeah. Now, the funny thing is, getting into Les Pauls versus Strats. I've always been a Les Paul guy. I don't know why. I remember seeing a Les Paul for the first time in a music store and thinking that right there. Then fast forward later on in life, I find out other things, like it's a shorter neck. The set neck has a feel to it. The resonation of the bridge and everything has a feel to it. But then the funny thing is, having a recording engineer mention a Les Paul, I've been in the studio where Les Pauls get thrown out the window because
really
they can't sit in the mix the way a Strat can, or the way an SG can, because it's just a little too thick of a tone. It takes a little bit too much work to get it to sit right.
Wow, that's new. That's completely new to me. Wow. Never heard that before, John. But that's actually really interesting and pretty cool to hear, because at least it shows that super Strats and traditional Stratocasters and stuff like that, and even like Strat shaped guitars, but with kind of Les Paul kind of specs. If they're going to sound cool in the studio, then that's a good sign. So
yeah,
so
yeah, well,
that's wow.
And the funny thing is, for every time I've seen that happen, you've got, like, say, a Zakk Wylde, who his tone sits just fine. And then I always look back to Jimmy Page, where I see a lot of studio shots where he's using a Telecaster. Not so much the Les Paul, but the Telecaster, just because I guess Bonham was so big that you needed a thinner sounding guitar to cut through, maybe.
Yeah, possibly. That does make sense. Telecasters are generally just like a really bright instrument, hence why they'll use like so much. They are like the type of guitar to use for bluegrass and country, because Fender Telecaster with a Fender amp, it's just this bright, really snappy guitar tone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, your ancestors will hear it. Now, you mentioned you like flying Vs. You got a flying V behind you there. What's in that flying V?
So that one has a super distortion in the bridge, DiMarzio super distortion, and a super 2 in the neck. That guitar was just so, just seeing like the evolution on that was just so kick-ass. Obviously, so that's an LTD V300, and originally it had like black nickel hardware, which is like the dark chrome hardware, and like the pick guard on it was like black pretty much, and it looked okay, and it came with EMGs, and it was okay, but then after getting all the black changed to gold, and then getting the DiMarzios in, man, that is one badass rocking instrument, big time. It sounds kick-ass.
Beautiful. Do we hear that guitar on Midnight City anywhere?
Unfortunately not. I only got that actually very shortly after we completely finished the album. Okay.
Now, how are Super Distortion, classic DiMarzio, and then the Super 2? Take us through that setup. How does that sound different
Right. Okay. So the Super 2 is basically is a tweaked version of the Super Distortion. So the Super 2 has basically got so much treble. It's got a lot. It's like 8 out of 10 on like treble, basically. Really, really bright. In fact, actually, the Super 2 was actually switched out for the in like say. So like early 80s. I know Paul Stanley did this. So Paul Stanley from Kiss used to use Super Distortion in the bridge on his Ibanez Icemen's, and then and they swapped him out for a Super 2. Once again, because an Iceman, once again, Les Paul kind of specs mahogany body, neck through, blah blah blah. And the Super 2, because it's like a very trebly pickup, it just slides through the mix, so much more. But to be honest, with that kind of setup, with the Super Distortion, the bridge, and the Super 2, so I asked DiMarzio. So when I was a teenager, I loved Michael Schenker. Mm-hmm. Really into Michael Schenker, but particularly his tone. So, like the late 80s era, Michael Schenker, when MSG was called Macaulay Schenker Group. Okay. And so I asked DiMarzio, what pickups would you recommend for that kind of tone? I'm putting it in an LTDV, told them the specs, and they were very cool, and like came back to me and said, well, we probably recommend Super Distortion in the bridge and Super 2 in the neck. And that combination just sounds so... It just sounds exactly like Michael Schenker. It's amazing. Like literally, you play like the cover of... All the Way from Memphis, what Schenker did with Contraband, where he had like Cher from Vixen and one of the guys from Rat and Shark Island. It just sounds exactly like that kind of era. It sounds awesome. It sounds amazing.
Yeah. So I'm guessing the Super 2 goes in the neck because it has more treble response, so it kind of balances out that neck position.
Yeah, pretty much. Basically in the neck, it just sounds like a really bright neck pickup. So if you're doing like fast, because generally if I'm doing like fast, like lead lines, going from like a low note to a high note, like 3 note 4 note per string kind of stuff, I always go to like the neck pickup, and then obviously with the Super 2, with it being quite trebly, it just slices through the mix. It sounds kick-ass.
Wow, a neck pickup that slices through the mix.
I know, you'd never think it, would you? But it sounds incredible.
Yeah. One of the things that really piqued my interest when I was chatting with the custom pickup manufacturer was they said, okay, you've got an Aaron Norton in your neck. How often do you use it? And I said, not very often. It's pretty dark unless I really set it the right way. And they said, okay, could you imagine having distortion on, ringing out an E chord, and you can actually hear each note of that E chord? And I said, that's just crazy talk. That's not possible. But they started alluding me to the fact that, like, well, hold on a second, what am I using my neck pickup even for? And something that you mentioned was the classic way a lot of guitar players do, which is, above the 12th fret, it's bridge pickup, and then, or below the 12th fret, it's the bridge pickup, above the 12th fret, it's the neck pickup. Well, what about dubbing rhythm guitar tracks and bringing in a fuzz pedal or something, to help thicken up a lower level of rhythm guitar tracks or clean guitar tracks or anything like that. And then I started thinking like, okay, well, who's got a guitar that kind of like has it all? Or at least I think. And that's when I came across George Lynch, because his guitar has got the Hunter in the bridge and then a single coil in the neck. And I don't know what he's actually used in the studio, but I listened to the records and I'm like, well, he's got a good clean sound, at least for docking. He's got a good distortion sound. I'll just get that guitar. Yeah. But
that's amazing.
Yeah. So I mean, it sounds like, actually, that's a really good question. Is the Super 2 good for that kind of a thing? Could you double up rhythm guitar tracks with the Super 2 in the neck?
I think you could. Yeah, I think you could. If you want, I mean, it's still going to sound warm, but it's got that extra high end that'll like just like help cut through the mix that a normal neck pickup just wouldn't do at all. They're just great, man. They're really, really cool.
Yeah. Something we've chatted about a little bit here is active versus passive, the great debate. And you mentioned a couple of negatives. Batteries to run the onboard preamp and because of the onboard preamp, I like to think of it as like there's a little overdrive pedal in there, and that's where you get the compression from. That's where you get the boost from. That's where you get the EQ curve from. I just like it's just a little, Maxon or TSE 808 in there kind of thing, right?
Yep.
But you said you didn't want that because that guitar had EMGs in it. What was it you didn't like about? I'm guessing that's an 81, 85 it came with.
It was I think it was an 81 and a 60 in the neck it originally came with, yeah. But it just sounded sterile, man. It just sounded really, I don't know, just plain. There was literally like no dynamics whatsoever. It's just, yeah. I wasn't digging it so much, but obviously, yeah. The only way I thought it sounded all right is if you do the classic, nu metal guitar tone, either 5150 or a message rectifier with a tube screamer, crank the level on the tube screamer, and that's the only way I can think that it would sound all right. But then the problem is with that, you just sound like any other like metal band. You look at guys like Bullet for My Valentine, Trivium, Metallica, Killswitch Engage. It's all EMG 81, 85, tube screamer, some high gain amp, and that's it. They sound great, they sound cool, but they just sound similar to each other. Well, I'm a bit more. That's one thing I like about DiMarzio. Like every single pickup just sounds, entirely different. And if you want to sound, if you want to get like your own like original tone, yeah, passives is just the way, man. Personally, that's just my opinion, of course, but that's it.
Well, this is the Miles Opinion Matters podcast.
Oh, well, I don't know about that, but I don't know.
Well, that kind of brings me to a very interesting question about the deactivator set. Then, because obviously you've played on an EMG 81. Is it a passive version of an EMG 81? What is it? I mean, what makes you use the deactivator set over an actual active set, whether it's like a Fishman or an EMG, whatever it would be?
It's one of those things where you got to try it out to believe it. Like EMG, EMGs were just too compressed, way too compressed. And well, like the deactivators, it's got just the correct amount of compression that you need. It's still got a bunch of sustain. The dynamics are great on it. You can still play blues and country, and it sounds fantastic. There's everything, the way it's EQ'd and everything just sounds great. It sounds really, really cool. But one of the things that it sounds really like particularly good at is like, say, if you're doing like the more extreme like Japanese kind of sounding heavy metal stuff, it sounds kick-ass for that. And the reason why I say that is because another one of my favorite guitar players, Takayoshi Omura, who is the guitarist for Baby Metal, and also he was I know it's crazy, but he was also the rhythm guitarist for Marty Friedman.
Yeah,
Marty Friedman from Megadeth.
Yep. And
he's done God knows how much like session music stuff for like video games, stuff like that. But his guitar, so he uses he has a signature ESP snapper, which is like Japanese, which is Japan's like ESPs is like Fender Stratocasters, basically, kind of. But he uses like a 7-string one, and he uses like so he used to use the DiMarzio like Yngwie Malmsteen pickup set, but nowadays he uses like just EMGs, just the 7-string ones. But it's in a 7-string Stratocaster, which is something you don't really hear of every day. Imagine that, a Fender Stratocaster with 7 strings on. It's kind of bizarre, but his tone is just absolutely incredible. And I thought, right, so obviously DiMarzio do these like active sounding like passive pickups, so I thought I'd try putting them in like a traditional Strat style guitar, and they sound kick-ass, man. They sound really, really awesome.
Sweet. Now, something else you mentioned there was plugging into like a 5150 or a dual rec or something like that. Naturally mid-scooped high gain amps that when you come in barreling down the hallway with an active pickup that's just a wall of mid range, it kind of just levels itself out in a way. But what do you use? What are we hearing on? What are we hearing on the record?
Okay, so how can I explain this? So a guitar amplifier has two sections. It has a preamp section and a power amp section. Okay. So what I've done is I'm using an ISP Technologies Theta preamp pedal. ISP Technologies is the very famous company doing like the best noise gate, the decimator. And that's what I'm using. And it's not valve. There's no tubes. It's all analog. It's just solid state. So I'm basically using that. And then into a Line 6 Helix, which is what I use for my audio interface. And then straight into Cubase. And then in Cubase, so if I was just to play that into Cubase, it would sound nasty because there's no power amp emulation or microphone simulation or cab sims. But then for all that, for the power amp sim, the cab sims, the mic simulators, it's all from the Andy James signature VST pack, but with STL tones, and it sounds awesome. It sounds amazing. And then obviously you just add your delay effects, from Cubase, and it sounds kick-ass.
Okay. Now, on the Helix, are you using something you would use in real life? Like it's just a digital version of it? Or did you get creative?
So literally, my Helix, I'm just using it just for effects. Just for delays, reverbs, harmonizers, choruses, phasers, flanges, all that good stuff. That's pretty much it. All the tone pretty much comes from my Theta, apart from my clean tone. For my clean tone, I do use the Roland JC120 amp model for my clean tones.
Classic.
Just because, exactly. You took the words right out of my mouth, John. Exactly, man. So you just to like early Metallica albums, and even like God knows how many like 80s hair metal bands where it came to like clean tones, that was like the clean amp to use, pretty much. Yeah.
The funny thing is metal uses a lot of jazz equipment.
That's very true. EMGs, once again, apparently they're meant to be really good for being used in jazz music, surprisingly.
Yeah. Well, and the Seymour Duncan JB supposedly stands for jazz and blues.
Yes, that is correct. Yes, it is. Yeah. That's very true.
Yeah. And then speaking of Metallica, Robert Trujillo plays on a jazz bass. Am I right?
I think you. Yeah. Well, he
probably
Robert
has
Trujillo,
a lot.
So he'll have God knows how many basses.
Yeah.
But yeah, I obviously there's videos of him where he's used P basses, jazz basses. The guy's used everything.
Yeah. What do we hear on Midnight City? Is it a jazz bass? Is it a P bass? What is it? Is it passive? Is it active?
It's passive P bass. Classic. Josh is because Josh is so Josh really loves he loves all like the classic British heavy metal kind of stuff. So your Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, Black Sabbath, Saxon, and he loves Steve Harris for Maiden, rightfully so, because obviously you're playing a rock band or a metal band, whatever. Steve Harris is just like he's a pinnacle bass player of like hard rock and heavy metal music. But yeah, so Josh uses Fender P basses. I think he swapped out the pickup in one of them. I think he's using a Seymour Duncan in one of them. I can't remember which one. I'm pretty sure, but yeah, he's using like really old like Fender P basses from like the 70s or something.
Very cool stuff. Now, if you've got more time, some things that we didn't chat about are Life of a Hero and a collaboration with Caned. Now, the funny thing is with Caned, I actually came across them through Shay Kane.
Shez. Yeah.
Shez. Okay.
Shez. Yeah.
Being Canadian, I just read it as, French. Like
that's no problem, man. That's no problem, dude. Not a problem.
And I'm like, the House of Cain? Is that what we're trying to say? I'm confused. And then I I listened and I was like, okay, cool, I dig it. And then I can't remember how I ended up finding out that she was in a band called Caned. And then you said you'd done some stuff with them. So take us through that. How are you getting around? Is it just because you're a good guitar player and people go, I want to work with that guy?
Well, so when I say worked with, so it wasn't exactly working with all of Caned. It was literally just Harry Scott Elliott, who is the main guitarist, the lead guitar player from Caned. And so when Midnight City, when we did our first ever tour with, which was with Vega, when we played in Wales, Harry came down. Harry came down to the show. It was at a venue called Fuel, and he came down, met the guy. You know, he said, "Man, awesome guitar playing, great tone." You know, I was like, "Thank you very much, man." He's like, "Oh, well, I play guitar too." And it's like, "Okay, man." Like, and he basically explained that that you know he's in a band called Caned, and you know I'd really heard of them before, you know, and he was explaining that he uses Engel amps, and which is really cool. And all this stuff, but sorry, the baby is very, very adorable.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, this is my daughter Avila. She's going to be 1 year old tomorrow.
Hello, darling.
Mm-hmm.
Bless her.
Yeah,
adorable.
Oh, well, thank you.
Reds, happy birthday for tomorrow, darling.
Yeah, you hear that? Miles says happy birthday.
Oh,
yeah.
Anyway, but yeah, so anyway. But then when and Harry said, you know, I'd love to work on a song with you. But obviously that was like 3 years ago. You know, when me and Harry first met, he said, like, you know, I'd love to do a song with you. I was like, yeah, man, that'd be awesome. But around the time I was very, very busy, you know, with like doing tours and everything and doing shows and rehearsing with, you know, Midnight City and all that stuff. But then obviously with, you know, because of lockdown, me and Harry, you know, got in touch with each other and said, well, look, you know, we've got time now. Let's bring out a single. You know, let's bring out an instrumental, you know, almost like shred virtuoso song. And really happy how it sounded, how it all went. It was an absolute pleasure working with Harry, and you know, and obviously like thank you very much to Shez as well for like promoting it, doing a bit of promo work on it. And yeah, the people from Caned are awesome. That's one that yeah we did meet up with. We did meet with Caned because they played just before Midnight City when we played at Hard Rock Hell. So yeah, which is really, really cool. So yeah, the guys from Caned, I love them. They're awesome, great band.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you do all the duties. You do rhythms and you do leads. And something I've noticed in Midnight City is you are proficient at both.
Thank you very much, mate. Thank you so much. But with Power Up, we also did. I also did the keyboards as well.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was because basically, when I was very young, I used to learn piano, and I got to like my grade 4, I think, when I was a teenager. So yeah, so it was really cool just to like, you know, get the old keyboard out and start recording. Because I love it with like heavy metal songs. If they've got keys in, everything sounds so much more cooler when it's got keyboards in. Yeah, and it was just amazing. Yeah, it was just sounded really cool. And obviously Harry did play bass as well, but then Harry did the mixing and mastering for the song as well.
Okay, very cool. Now, something else you mentioned was Life of a Hero, and I remember you mentioning that with that one specifically, you used the deactivator set a lot to do the rhythm tracks, and I was just curious. Take us through that and why the different choice for rhythm tracks.
Okay, so with Life of a Hero, that's more of like we're a bit more of a modern rock, but kind of like biker rock in a way, basically. So yeah, and I needed a guitar that was like obviously a Stratocaster, classic guitar. Obviously, if you're doing like biker rock, you know, you have to use a guitar that's like a biker rock band would probably use. So something like, you know, a Strat or a Tele or a Les Paul or an SG has to be some kind of like classic sounding guitar. And then the reason with the deactivator is because they've just naturally got a hell of a lot more gain. You know, they've just got a hell of a lot more gain. So I thought that would sound really, really cool for like doing like kind of like modern biker rock kind of sound music, and use those, and yeah, they sound awesome.
Okay. Cool. What's coming to mind for biker rock bands, and maybe I'm going to get slaughtered on this one, but maybe because I was just listening to them in the car, was Black Label Society. Is it something like that, or
that's cool? That's pretty cool. Yeah, it's Black Label Society. So that's like proper heavy metal. When I wouldn't class as metal. We're still hard rock. I mean, as much I love heavy metal and I love Zakk Wylde. Zakk Wylde is amazing. It's just more like I'd probably compare it maybe more to like maybe bands like Clutch. You know the band Clutch?
I do know the band Clutch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that little bit of like southern rock kind of influence like thrown in there.
Okay. All right, southern rock, baby. Like Down, or would you consider Down to be more metal?
Oof, that's hard. That's a tough one. Because they are obviously it's rock, but yeah, I'd say they're just verging on metal.
Uh-huh.
Just. You know,
on the verge of metal. Sweet. So today we chatted about our mutual love of Racer X. We chatted about active versus passive pickups. We chatted about Les Pauls versus Strats. We chatted about the JC120 Roland amp. We chatted about Midnight City. We chatted about Life of a Hero. We chatted about Caned. We chatted about a whole schwack of DiMarzio gear. And I guess my hope for this video when it goes up is that a bunch of guitar nerds just start fighting in the chat about, you know, which pickup sounds better or not. And
I hope not. I don't want to cause a war here.
It's very true. It's very true. Okay, cool. Was there anything else that you wanted to chat about, Miles?
Thank you so much, everybody, for all the support with Midnight City. New album comes out tomorrow, and that is the 11th of June. So if you listen to this after the 11th of June, then the album's out. So thank you guys so much for the support. Thank you very much to Roulette Media for all your support. You guys rock. Thank you very much, John, for having me on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure. It's been awesome talking to you, brother. Thank you very much. And yeah, keep rocking the world, everyone. Take care.
Beautiful. I will hit stop.